The Betrayal of Zera. The twin sons of Wraith Prime cast an intense light over the towering spires of the Ryan capital, creating a fierce glow that filled the high, vaulted halls of the Intergalactic Council. At the center of this grand space stood Zera, a warrior diplomat of the Ryan people. Her violet skin shimmered in the sun's harsh light, radiating an otherworldly beauty as she prepared to secure a historic peace accord. She had dedicated her life to this moment, her body and mind trained in the arts of diplomacy and battle, every movement calculated with the precision of a trained warrior. But today, a strange unease had lodged itself within her, a feeling of looming disaster that her instincts couldn't shake. The Ryans and the Alans, two powerful factions long embroiled in a bitter struggle over territory and influence, had been on the verge of war for years. Zera had spent countless hours in negotiation rooms, working through endless disputes, bargaining for a peace that could bring stability to both peoples. And now, she was on the brink of sealing an accord that would forever change the course of history. Her heart swelled with pride and determination, yet the uneasy feeling persisted. Suddenly, a deep rumble echoed through the hall as the grand doors swung open. A group of Ryan soldiers entered, their faces hard, their eyes void of emotion. The sight made her tense instinctively. This was supposed to be a day of celebration, not an armed procession. Her gaze drifted to the lifeless form they carried into the chamber, and her breath caught in her throat. It was Ambassador Talik, the Alan diplomat she had worked with so closely, now covered in blood, his eyes wide and empty. Shock spread through the council chamber as whispers turned to shouts, chaos rippling outward like a wave. Her pulse quickened, but she stood her ground, every muscle tight with alarm. General Kath, her former mentor and one of the most influential figures in the council, stepped forward. The cold, sharp look in his eyes chilled her, even more so than the accusation that followed. "Zera," he announced, his voice echoing through the hall, "what have you done?" Zera blinked, confusion clouding her thoughts. She hadn't seen Talik since the previous night, and there was no possible way she could be involved in this tragedy. "I've done nothing, General," she replied, her voice steady despite the rising storm of emotions within her. "You know I was in my chambers, reviewing the final terms." But her defense fell on deaf ears. Holographic screens flashed to life around the hall, displaying images of the crime scene. She watched in horror as scenes of her standing over Talik's body played out. Her hand held a ceremonial blade, its edge slick with the dark red of his blood. The footage was so perfect, so vivid, that for a fleeting moment she questioned her own memory. But deep down, she knew the truth. This was a fabrication, a precise illusion crafted to destroy her. General Kath's gaze never wavered. His eyes bore into hers, filled not with the familiarity of a mentor, but with the cold calculation of an enemy. "We have undeniable proof," he said, signaling to a soldier who held up her ceremonial blade, her own fingerprints engraved upon the hilt. It was the very weapon she had planned to wear for the peace ceremony, now twisted into an instrument of betrayal. "This cannot be," Zera exclaimed, her voice laced with desperation. "I did not kill him. Someone has orchestrated this to frame me." Kath's lips twisted into a mocking smile. "And who, Zera, would do such a thing? You, a figure of peace, trusted by both sides. Or is it that the power of influence went to your head?" His words dripped with venom, and in that moment, Zera understood. This was no external plot. This was the work of her own people. The council chamber erupted with accusations and condemnation. Friends, allies, mentors, all of them looked at her with a mixture of horror and betrayal. She felt the crushing weight of their judgment, the walls of trust she had carefully built collapsing around her. The very people she had served her entire life were ready to cast her aside. Ryan guards began to close in around her, their faces as hard and cold as the stone floors beneath them. Her mind raced, every instinct screaming for survival. She had trained for this, for scenarios where betrayal could strike without warning. Her combat instincts kicked in, faster than the guards could anticipate. With a swift, practiced motion, she disarmed the nearest guard and used his momentum to send him crashing into the next. She didn't look back as she bolted toward the exit, pushing through the throng of council members who shrank back in shock. Outside, the heat of the suns blazed down on her as she sprinted through the narrow, winding streets of the capital, her lungs burning with each breath. She knew her time was running out. Soon, they would spread the word of her alleged crime across the galaxy. She was now a fugitive, branded a murderer and a traitor. Her once loyal people would become her hunters, and her beloved home was now enemy territory. After minutes that felt like hours, Zira stumbled upon a hidden alcove, a dim alley far from the council's reach. She collapsed against the wall, her heart racing, her thoughts spiraling as she pieced together what had happened. General Cass's betrayal had been as flawless as the forged evidence. She had been a pawn in his game, a puppet dangled to secure his influence and power. This so-called peace was nothing but a mirage, a tool to consolidate his control of the Ryan and Alan people alike. Her mind sharpened as a plan began to form. She would expose Cass's deception, even if it cost her everything. She couldn't erase the footage, nor could she change the narrative that had already spread through the council. But she could gather proof of her innocence and confront him with the truth. She would fight with every fiber of her being to reveal his lies, to make the galaxy see what had truly happened here. With a final steadying breath, Zira stood up and surveyed the cityscape she had once called home. The capital glistened under the relentless suns, oblivious to the schemes unfolding within its walls. She turned and vanished into the depths of the city, her figure swallowed by shadows as she embarked on a journey of redemption and revenge. This was not the end for her, it was only the beginning. Escape to the unknown. The underground streets of Wraith Prime were a labyrinth of shadows and secrecy, a hidden world far removed from the shining towers above. It was here, beneath the towering structures of the capital, that Zira found herself slipping into the darker underbelly where the law barely reached, and her enemies might not follow. She kept her movements swift and deliberate, relying on her instincts honed through years of combat training. She had evaded capture for now, but she knew that the moment the council issued her bounty, every corner of the galaxy would be on alert. For Zira, time was running out. Her side ached with each step. She clutched the plasma burn that had seared her skin during her escape. Blood seeped through her fingers, staining her once proud ceremonial attire. She had always worn this outfit with pride, a representation of her people and her purpose. Now, it marked her as a fugitive. For the first time in her life, she felt vulnerable, her very identity branded as a lie. After hours of navigating the hidden passages of the city, she reached a secluded docking station used mostly by smugglers and traders, individuals who operated outside the bounds of the Ryan government. Zira scanned the area, her gaze settling on a dilapidated cargo vessel docked in the shadows. The ship was old and weathered, the paint peeling with scorch marks decorating its battered hull. But right now, it was her best chance of getting off Wraith Prime undetected. She approached cautiously, her senses alert for any sign of the ship's crew. As she moved closer, a rough voice called out, startling her. "Stop right there, state your business." A figure stepped out from behind a stack of crates, a man of human descent. His face was weathered and scarred, his eyes narrowed with suspicion as he assessed her. Humans were rare on Wraith Prime, and Zira couldn't help but feel a glimmer of surprise. It had been years since she'd encountered one in person. "I need transport off this planet. I can pay," Zira replied, steadying her voice and meeting his gaze with a steely determination. The man looked her over, his eyes lingering on the blood-stained tear in her attire. "You don't look like just any Ryan wanting a quick exit. Who are you running from?" Zira hesitated. Revealing her identity could mean a swift rejection, or worse, capture. She took a deep breath, trying to gauge whether she could trust this stranger. The urgency of her situation left her little choice. "I'm Zira, formerly a diplomat, now branded a traitor," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. The words felt strange in her mouth, a reminder of how her life had been turned upside down in a matter of hours. The man's expression softened slightly, his gaze flickering with something like understanding. "Diplomat, huh? Well, I don't usually take on fugitives," he replied, scratching his chin thoughtfully. "But I don't usually see someone with your kind of look on their face, either. A mix of desperation and determination, like you've got something worth fighting for." Zira clenched her jaw. "I have nothing left here," she replied, "but I need to clear my name. If I don't, the people who orchestrated this, they'll go unpunished. Innocent lives will be destroyed." The man sighed, seemingly weighing his options. Finally, he nodded toward the ship. "All right, Zira, I'm Raylan, and if you're set on running, you'd best do it with someone who knows a thing or two about escape. But don't make me regret this. I'm not risking my neck for a lost cause." Relief flooded through her, and she allowed herself a faint smile. "Thank you, Raylan. I won't make you regret it." Once aboard, Raylan showed her to a small corner of the cargo hold. The space was cramped and filled with crates and machinery, but it was safe and, more importantly, hidden. Zara sank onto one of the crates, exhaustion pressing down on her like a weight. She watched Raylan as he worked the ship's controls, his fingers moving swiftly over the worn console. Within moments, the ship shuddered as it lifted off, rising steadily through the atmosphere of Rith Prime. Zira watched the planet recede through a small viewport, her heart a mix of sorrow and anger. Her home, her people, and her purpose had all been stripped from her in a single orchestrated act of betrayal. She clenched her fists, vowing silently that she would find a way to return, not to reclaim her former life, but to bring justice to those who had wronged her. As the ship broke free of the atmosphere and entered the cold expanse of space, Raylan glanced back at her. "So, where are you headed, exactly?" Zira hadn't thought that far ahead. Her life had been one of careful planning, each move calculated and precise. Now she was adrift, with no clear destination, no allies, and little knowledge of what lay beyond her home planet. But one thing she knew for certain: she needed answers. "I need to find evidence," she replied, thinking aloud. "Proof of my innocence and proof of General Cath's betrayal. He's the one who framed me, who used me as a pawn in his twisted game." Raylan raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like you've got a rough road ahead. But if you're serious, I know a place you might find some help. There's a fringe colony in the Gavanist system. It's mostly made up of outcasts, people who've been tossed aside by their own governments. Some of them might know a thing or two about gathering unconventional information." Zira nodded, feeling a spark of hope. It wasn't much, but it was a start. "The Gavanist system. I've heard stories about it. They say it's lawless, a place where only the desperate or the brave survive." Raylan smirked. "Lucky for you, you seem to be both." The journey was long, and during the quiet hours, Zira had time to reflect on the enormity of her situation. Her memories returned to the council chambers, to the faces of those she had trusted who now looked upon her with disgust and betrayal. She thought of her family, of the Ryan people she had sworn to protect, and above all, she thought of General Cath's smug face, the twisted satisfaction he had taken in her downfall. Her rage simmered beneath the surface, a fierce flame that kept her awake as the stars drifted past outside. As they neared the Gavanist system, Raylan adjusted their course, his expression turning serious. "One more thing, Zira. If you're going to survive out here, you'll need to learn the rules of this world. The people in Gavanis don't care who you were back on Wraith Prime. To them, you're just another outsider, another problem. Keep your head down, don't trust too easily, and above all, don't give them a reason to turn on you." She met his gaze, her eyes hard. "I've learned a thing or two about betrayal already. Trust me, I won't make the same mistake twice." As the ship descended toward the barren, rocky surface of Gavanis Prime, Zira felt a mixture of dread and determination. This world was harsh, unforgiving, and filled with people who cared nothing for her status or her past. But she welcomed the challenge. This journey wasn't about comfort. It was about survival, redemption, and retribution, and she would endure whatever hardships came her way to reclaim her honor and her purpose. With a jolt, the ship landed, sending a cloud of dust spiraling into the air. Raylan powered down the engines and glanced over at her, a faint look of admiration crossing his face. "Welcome to Gavanis Prime, Zira," he said. "Let's hope it's as kind to you as you are determined to be to it." Steeling herself, Zira stepped off the ship and into the chaotic world of Gavanis. She was ready. The shadows of Gavanis. The landscape of Gavanis Prime stretched before Zira like a wasteland of jagged rocks and desolate plains, punctuated only by small, dilapidated structures scattered across the horizon. Dust billowed in fierce gusts, swirling around her as she stepped off the ship, cloaking the sun in a gritty haze. The air was thick with the scent of metal and oil, laced with the unmistakable tang of burnt fuel. Gavanis was a stark contrast to the polished corridors of Wraith Prime, a place where survival ruled above all, and Zira could feel its harshness seep into her bones with every step. Raylan led her through a maze of pathways carved into the rocky terrain, his movements confident and swift. People appeared in the shadows, glancing at her with suspicious eyes, their faces obscured by scarves or worn helmets. Here, everyone was a stranger, an outsider trying to carve out a place in a world that had forgotten them. Zira kept her gaze steady, matching the defiant stance of those around her, determined not to show any vulnerability. "You'll need to keep a low profile here," Raylan murmured as they entered the narrow alley leading to a cluster of buildings. "The people on Gavanis don't care about who you were or what you were accused of. They only care if you're useful or dangerous." Zira nodded, scanning the faces of those they passed. She noticed the myriad of alien species mingling with humans, creatures with scales, others with feathered crests, and some cloaked in shadow, their eyes glowing faintly beneath their hoods. It was a place where no one was welcome, yet everyone could find refuge, so long as they brought value or kept their secrets. They arrived at a weathered structure, barely holding itself together with rusted metal beams and patched windows. A dim light flickered above the entrance, casting an ominous glow. Raylan motioned for her to follow him inside, his expression unreadable. The interior was dark and smoky, lit only by a few sputtering lamps. Tables were scattered haphazardly, occupied by figures who spoke in low tones, their voices a murmur that blended with the hum of faulty machinery. Zira noticed the subtle movements of hands passing objects under the tables, hushed exchanges of credits and contraband. This was a place of deals made in shadows, where secrets were as valuable as currency. Raylan led her to a corner booth where an older woman with a face lined by age and hardship sat waiting. Her gaze was sharp, assessing, as she took in Zira's appearance. She wore a battered leather jacket with a silver insignia on the collar, a mark Zira recognized as belonging to a once-feared Ryan resistance leader. This woman had seen her share of battles and betrayals. "Raylan," she greeted him, her voice low and gravelly, with a hint of amusement. "You brought me an interesting guest." Raylan nodded, glancing at Zira. "This is Zira. She's got complicated circumstances, needs help." The woman's gaze flickered to Zira, her expression unreadable. "Complicated, People don't come to Gavanis without a reason." She leaned back, crossing her arms. "So Zira, tell me, why would someone like you need help from someone like me?" Zira took a steadying breath, choosing her words carefully. "I was framed by General Cath, my former mentor. He twisted evidence to paint me as a murderer, to turn the council against me and secure his own power. I escaped Wraith Prime to clear my name, but I need proof of his treachery to do it." The woman listened without interruption, her eyes narrowing slightly. When Zira finished, the woman leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. "So, you're on a revenge quest, or is it redemption you seek?" "Both," Zira replied, her voice firm. "Cath betrayed not only me, but the ideals of peace I worked for. He used my loyalty and my influence to manipulate events for his own gain. If I don't expose him, more lives will be lost, More people will be betrayed. I can't let that happen. The woman studied her, a flicker of respect crossing her face. You're bold, Zira. But Gaverness is filled with people who try to fight the system and lost. Kaf's reach is long, and his influence powerful. The council has eyes and ears everywhere, even here. Zara felt a chill at the thought. She had been so focused on escaping Wraithprine that she hadn't considered just how far Kaf's influence might extend. She steeled herself, her determination unshaken. If there's even a small chance I can find allies here, I'll take it. I have nothing left to lose. The woman nodded slowly, a small, approving smile playing at her lips. You might just be stubborn enough to survive here, Zira. She glanced at Raylan, then back to Zara. I'm Tessa. I used to lead a resistance cell against the Ryan Council back in the day. I know how to gather information, how to find secrets people don't want found. If you're serious, I can put you in touch with those who can help, but it won't be easy. I didn't expect it to be, Zara replied, her tone resolute. She had made it this far, and no matter how difficult the road ahead, she was prepared to face it. Tessa leaned in, her eyes glinting with a hint of intrigue. There's a man here on Gaverness, a Ryan scientist named Orlin, who was once close to the Council's inner circle. He turned against them, exposed some of their deepest secrets, and fled. Now he's hiding out in the outskirts, keeping to himself, but he has information that might help you. Zira's heart skipped a beat. Orlin? I remember hearing whispers about him. He vanished years ago. Some said he was exiled, others claimed he went rogue. Both, probably, Tessa replied with a shrug. But he's one of the few people who might know how to break through Kaf's network of lies. Problem is, he doesn't trust anyone. You'll have to convince him you're worth helping. Raylan shot her a warning look. Orlin's not someone you just convince, Zara. He's paranoid, highly guarded. If he sees you as a threat, he won't hesitate to turn you in, or worse. Zira met Raylan's gaze steadily. I'll find a way. If he's as paranoid as you say, then he's probably also tired of running, tired of being used. I can appeal to that. Tessa smiled, impressed. Maybe you're right. Orlin's compound is in the deep ravines north of here. It's well hidden, with traps and security all around. You'll need someone to guide you. Zara glanced at Raylan, a silent question in her eyes. He rolled his eyes, muttering under his breath before nodding. Fine, I'll take you. But don't expect me to pull you out if things go south. With a plan in place, they gathered supplies, cloaks to shield them from the harsh sun, rations, and a crude map marked with the compound's approximate location. Zara felt a strange mixture of hope and apprehension as they set out, venturing deeper into the rugged wilderness of Gaverness Prime. The journey was grueling. They trekked through valleys, filled with jagged rock formations, and climbed steep ridges, where loose stones threatened to pull them down with every step. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional gust of wind that sent a shiver through the desolate landscape. After hours of navigating treacherous terrain, they reached a narrow path that led into a canyon. Raylan raised a hand, signaling Zira to stop. From here, we go quietly. Orlin has sensors all over this area. One wrong step, and he'll know we're here. Zira nodded, her body tense as they moved cautiously along the canyon's edge. Shadows loomed over them, and the silence grew thicker, each sound amplified by the canyon walls. She could feel her heart racing, adrenaline surging as they approached the compound. Finally, they reached a ledge overlooking a small, hidden structure built into the rock face. Raylan pointed to a narrow path leading down. That's his hideout. This is as far as I go. You're on your own from here. Zira looked at him, her gratitude clear. Thank you, Raylan. I'll find a way to repay you. He waved her off, giving her a faint smirk. Just don't get yourself killed, all right. With a final nod, Zira descended the path alone, her mind focused, her senses alert. As she approached the entrance to Orlin's compound, she felt a surge of resolve. She was closer than ever to uncovering the truth, to finding the answers that would bring her one step closer to justice. Taking a deep breath, she knocked on the rusted metal door, ready to face whatever lay inside. An uneasy alliance. The metal door echoed with a hollow clang as Zira's hand met the cold surface, sending a faint vibration up her arm. Silence filled the canyon for a long moment, leaving her with nothing but the sound of her own heartbeat. She shifted her stance, ready to respond to whatever, or whoever, awaited on the other side. Slowly, a grating mechanical wire cut through the quiet, and the door creaked open just wide enough to reveal a dark, narrow passage lit by the faint glow of red warning lights. Zira's instincts screamed caution as she stepped through the doorway. A harsh voice echoed through the passage, metallic and distorted. "State your name and purpose. Don't waste my time." "Zira of the Ryan Council," she replied, her voice steady. "I'm here seeking information about General Kath. He framed me, and I need proof of his betrayal." There was a pause, then the voice came again, a note of cynicism creeping in. "Ah, another fool looking for revenge. And you thought you'd find answers here, of all places." The voice let out a low, mirthless chuckle. "Tell me, Zira, how desperate must you be to seek out an exile like me?" "I didn't come here out of desperation," she replied, standing tall even though she couldn't see the speaker. "I came here because I believe you've seen the same corruption I have. I believe you know what it's like to have the truth twisted against you, and I think you know how to stop it." Silence followed her words, stretching longer than before. Zira kept her gaze fixed on the dimly lit passage, her hands clenched at her sides. If she had misjudged Orlin, her journey would end here. But finally, a light flickered at the far end of the passage, illuminating a door that slid open with a sharp hiss. "Come in," the voice instructed, now softened by a trace of intrigue. Zira walked forward, her steps deliberate and measured. The room she entered was cramped and cluttered, filled with consoles, cables, and various pieces of scavenged technology. Screens mounted on the walls displayed feeds of various council chambers, council members in conversation, and endless streams of data. At the center of it all sat a figure hunched over a console, a tall, wiry man with graying hair and tired eyes that still held a spark of keen intelligence. This was Orlin, the former Ryan scientist turned recluse. Orlin didn't look up as she approached, his fingers flying over the console with practiced ease. "You said Kath framed you," he murmured, finally sparing her a quick, calculating glance. "What makes you think I'd be willing to help?" Zira met his gaze, her expression resolute. "Because you've seen his methods firsthand. You exposed the Council's secrets once. You know what they're capable of. Kath's influence has only grown since then, and now he's willing to sacrifice anyone who stands in his way, including me." Orlin's lips twisted into a bitter smile. "Oh, I know what Kath is capable of," he said, his tone laced with irony. "But it seems you have a lot of faith in people's willingness to see the truth. I risked everything to expose the Council's corruption, and they buried me, and my research, so deep that no one even remembers I existed. Why should I believe that your fate will be any different?" Zira took a step closer, her eyes burning with determination. "Because I won't give up. I'm not here to become a martyr or a forgotten relic. I'm here to tear down the lies, to make sure Kath pays for his betrayal. I'll do whatever it takes to stop him, even if it means fighting the Council from the shadows." Orlin regarded her with a mixture of skepticism and grudging respect. "So you're serious," he said, more to himself than to her. "Perhaps you're even reckless enough to make it happen." He leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing as he studied her. "But if you want my help, there's a price. I have no interest in revenge alone. I want to see the Council's entire network dismantled. I want the people of Ruth Prime to know what's been done in their name. I'll give you what you need to expose Kath, but you'll have to expose all of them." Zira didn't flinch. "Agreed, whatever it takes." Orlin nodded slowly, his gaze finally softening. "Then we begin. The Council operates through a network of agents and informants spread across the galaxy, each one connected by encrypted communications. CAF uses them to manipulate the Council's decisions and to eliminate anyone who stands in his way. But there's one flaw: CAF's communication hub. If we can breach it, we'll have access to the data that proves your innocence and reveals the true extent of his influence. He turned to one of the consoles, bringing up a schematic of a heavily guarded compound on Wraith Prime. The hub is located here, in the central government district. The compound is fortified with guards and security systems. You'll need to infiltrate it, download the data, and bring it back here. Zira studied the schematic, her mind racing as she absorbed the information. Breaking into the government district won't be easy. They'll be watching for any sign of me. Orlan smirked, a glint of mischief in his eyes. Luckily, I have a few tricks up my sleeve. There's an old infiltration device I built, a small cloaking field generator that'll hide you from most of their surveillance. It's unstable, experimental, and liable to malfunction, but it's the best chance you've got. He handed her a small, unassuming device about the size of her palm, its surface covered in intricate circuitry. Zira held it carefully, feeling the weight of it in her hand. It wasn't much, but it was a lifeline, a chance to move undetected in the very heart of her enemy's stronghold. Orlan's face grew serious as he continued. One more thing. You'll need to act fast. Once you activate the cloaking field, you'll have about 20 minutes before it fails. If you're still in the compound by then, you won't make it out. Zira nodded, her mind already formulating a plan. 20 minutes. I can work with that. He nodded, an approving look crossing his face. You'll leave at dawn. I'll arrange for transport to get you close to the compound, but from there, you're on your own. They spent the rest of the evening reviewing maps, discussing possible escape routes, and analyzing the security measures in place. Zira was struck by Orlan's meticulous attention to detail. His knowledge of the Council's methods was invaluable. She felt a spark of hope, knowing she was finally making progress. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Orlan handed her a small bag filled with supplies. This is it, he said, his voice tinged with both caution and encouragement. If you pull this off, we'll have the evidence we need to bring CAF down. Just remember, don't get caught. Zira met his gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. Thank you, Orlan. I won't forget this. He nodded, his expression softening just a little. You're tougher than you look, Zira. Maybe, just maybe, you'll be the one to succeed where the rest of us failed. With that, she left the compound, feeling the weight of the mission settle on her shoulders. Raylan was waiting by the ship, his expression a mixture of worry and reluctant respect. So you're really going through with this, he said, shaking his head. You must be the most stubborn person I've ever met. Zira managed a faint smile. I've been called worse. He chuckled, then grew serious. I'll take you as far as I can, but once you're inside, you're on your own. They flew in silence, the barren landscape of Gavanis blurring past as the ship sped toward the rendezvous point. Zira watched the horizon, her mind focused on the task ahead. She thought of her life on Wraith Prime, the ideals she had once held, the trust that had been shattered. And now she was close, so close to reclaiming her truth, to striking back at those who had betrayed her. When they reached the drop point, Raylan turned to her, a flicker of concern in his eyes. Good luck, Zira. Try not to die, all right. She nodded, giving him a small, grateful smile. I'll see you on the other side. With that, she activated the cloaking field, feeling the strange hum of energy ripple around her as she vanished from view. She slipped from the ship, moving toward the compound with silent footsteps. Each second was a heartbeat, each step a countdown. She was in enemy territory now, and failure was not an option. As she approached the towering walls of the compound, her heart pounded with both fear and resolve. She knew that she was about to step into the lion's den, to confront the very core of the power that had wronged her, but she had no intention of backing down. This was her fight, and she would see it through to the end. In the heart of darkness, The towering compound loomed before Zera, a monolithic structure bathed in the silver light of Rith Prime's moons. Shadows played across its sleek walls, broken only by the occasional sweep of searchlights that scanned the perimeter. Zera kept to the edges of the light's path, her breath steady and her heart pounding as she approached the outer wall. The cloaking device thrummed against her skin, its field wrapping her in an invisible shield. She moved carefully, aware of the 20-minute countdown ticking in her mind. 20 minutes to infiltrate the compound, find the data hub, and retrieve the evidence that would expose General Kath. It was an impossible task, but she reminded herself that this was her only chance. The stakes were too high to allow even a shadow of doubt. She crouched beside the wall, pressing a small button on her cloak to release a set of magnetic hooks. With practiced precision, she latched them onto the wall and began her ascent, her movements swift but careful, every motion calculated to minimize noise. Above her, security cameras scanned the grounds, their mechanical eyes searching for any sign of disturbance. She kept her focus, using every ounce of training to remain undetected. At the top of the wall, she paused, scanning the courtyard below. It was a sterile expanse of reinforced stone and polished metal, lined with rows of patrolling guards and surveillance drones. She waited, counting the seconds until a group of guards passed by before descending swiftly, dropping into the shadows cast by a row of supply crates. Her landing was silent, but her heart hammered as she crouched, her body tense. Zera glanced at the digital map Orlan had provided. The data hub was located 3 floors down, in the sub-levels beneath the central building. She had memorized every twist and turn, every possible route and alternate escape path. Now, all she needed was the perfect window to slip past the guards. Keeping low, she moved from one shadow to the next, her footsteps muffled by the cloaking field. A guard passed within inches of her, and she held her breath, feeling the hum of the device flicker as she brushed past him. The tension was almost unbearable, but Zera focused on her goal. Every second counted. Finally, she reached the main building. The doors were locked, secured by a retinal scanner that flashed red as she approached. Orlan had warned her of this obstacle, and she reached into her pack for the small cylindrical device he had given her. She held it up to the scanner, activating the spoofing mechanism, and watched as the light turned green, the door sliding open with a soft hiss. Inside, the hallway was dimly lit, lined with walls of reinforced glass. It was eerily silent, the hum of machinery, the only sound echoing through the narrow corridor. She moved swiftly, her steps soundless, the countdown ticking in her mind as she approached the stairwell leading down to the sub-levels. Descending the stairs, she reached a secure door marked with an encrypted keypad. Zera took a deep breath, attaching a compact hacking module to the device. It whirred softly, its internal mechanics decoding the complex encryption. As the lock clicked open, she pushed the door and slipped inside. The room beyond was filled with rows of data terminals, glowing screens casting a faint, blue light across the metallic walls. Zera's eyes zeroed in on the main terminal at the far end of the room. It was larger than the others, its screen displaying lines of encrypted text that scrolled by in a blur. This was the heart of the compound's data storage, the place where Kath's secrets were hidden, wrapped in layers of digital security. She approached the terminal, plugging in the drive Orlan had given her. The screen flashed, the device beginning its work as it searched through the vast network for any files tied to Kath. Zera's fingers flew over the keys, her focus absolute. Each file was another piece of the puzzle, a fragment of the truth that had been buried under lies and manipulation. She felt a surge of hope as the first file opened, revealing a list of encrypted messages. The messages detailed Kath's communications with the Shadow Network, names of agents scattered across Wraith Prime and beyond, along with orders to sabotage peace negotiations and frame dissenters. Zera's stomach turned as she read through them, each line solidifying the depths of his betrayal. These messages were damning, undeniable proof of Kath's ambitions. She saved each one, her fingers shaking slightly as she moved through the files. But as she worked, a faint alarm sounded in the distance. Her heart raced, and she glanced at the countdown on her device. Less than 6 minutes remained before the cloaking field failed. She moved faster, her hands a blur as she gathered the last files. Just a few more seconds, and she would have enough to confront him, to expose his treachery for all to see. A sudden sound echoed down the hallway, a pair of heavy footsteps, growing louder. Her body tensed as she finished transferring the final file. The footsteps stopped just outside the door, followed by a harsh voice that sent a chill through her. "Search the room," the voice commanded. "We have a breach." Zira barely had time to eject the drive before the door slid open. She ducked behind the terminal, her breathing shallow as she pressed herself into the shadows. 2 guards entered, their faces obscured by helmets, their eyes scanning the room for any sign of disturbance. Zira held her breath, gripping the drive tightly in her hand as the guards moved closer. One of them paused by her hiding spot, his visor glinting in the blue light. Zira remained motionless, her heart pounding in her chest. Just a few more moments, and they would move on. But suddenly, her cloaking device emitted a faint, high-pitched whine, a warning sign of its imminent failure. The guard's head snapped in her direction, his eyes narrowing as he raised his weapon. Reacting instinctively, Zira lunged forward, knocking the weapon out of his grasp. The other guard shouted, raising his own weapon, but she moved faster, disarming him with a swift kick. She fought with a silent, lethal precision, each movement smooth and deliberate. Within seconds, both guards lay unconscious at her feet. The alarm had escalated to a blaring wail, filling the entire compound. Zira bolted for the door, the countdown in her mind now a frantic drumbeat as she sprinted back toward the stairwell. Every second was precious, her only chance to escape slipping away with each step. She raced through the corridors, retracing her path as the compound's security forces closed in. Her cloaking field flickered and then failed entirely, leaving her exposed. She didn't stop, her footsteps echoing through the hall as she ran. Around a corner, she spotted a group of guards blocking her path, their weapons raised. Zira veered into a side passage, dodging blasts of energy that scorched the walls behind her. The exit was close, just a few more turns. She could see the main doors ahead, the moonlight spilling through as she sprinted toward freedom. A blast of energy seared past her shoulder, grazing her arm. She bit back a cry of pain, forcing herself to keep moving, the exit growing larger with each step. Finally, she burst through the doors, stumbling into the courtyard. She was exposed, her path cut off by more guards advancing from every direction. She glanced around, her gaze landing on a supply vehicle parked near the wall. With a burst of adrenaline, she sprinted toward it, diving behind the wheel and jamming the controls into gear. The vehicle lurched forward, crashing through the gates and speeding out into the open terrain beyond the compound. Zira gripped the controls tightly, her vision blurring as pain radiated from her wounded arm. She glanced back, watching as the compound receded into the distance, its lights fading into the darkness. She had escaped, but the danger was far from over. The council would stop at nothing to silence her, to bury the evidence she carried. Breathing heavily, she steered the vehicle toward the rendezvous point where Raylan had agreed to meet her. Her heart hammered with both fear and relief, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. She had the proof now, the undeniable evidence of Kaf's betrayal, but she knew that this was only the beginning. With the council's forces closing in, her journey was about to grow even more treacherous. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Zira felt a renewed sense of purpose. She would fight, she would survive, and she would see justice done, no matter what it took.